This podcast is brought to you by Liminal MarTech. Liminal is the first Portuguese company specialized in strategic consulting and marketing operations. If you want to grow your business and deliver better customer experiences with marketing technologies such as CRM, automation, and BI, go to www.liminal.pt and find out how. Welcome to today's deep dive. We're exploring Rory Sutherland's book, Alchemy. Ever feel like the best tech products or marketing campaigns just hit differently? It's like they tap into something deeper than logic. They just work, even if you can't quite explain why. That's exactly what we're unpacking today.
Yeah, Sutherland's book is all about challenging the assumption that logic alone leads to the best solutions, particularly in the world of tech. He argues that sometimes embracing the unexpected, or even seemingly nonsensical, can lead to incredible breakthroughs.
So are you saying that all these data-driven decisions, A/B testing, and hyper-rational product development strategies are missing something?
Not entirely. But traditional methods often rely on what Sutherland calls broken binoculars. They give us a limited view of what truly motivates people. Think about those market research surveys asking, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to? They just don't capture the full complexity of human behavior.
Okay, I see what you mean. We humans are more than just data points. So what are we missing? What's the lens we should be using instead of those broken binoculars?
Instead of relying solely on logic, Sutherland introduces the concept of psychologic. It's those intuitive, often unconscious drivers behind our decisions. Think of it like this. A sugar pill shouldn't have any effect on your health.
Right.
But the placebo effect shows us it can, simply because our minds respond to suggestion and belief. The same thing happens in tech.
So we're not always driven by pure cold logic. We make choices based on things we might not even be aware of. And these choices can be effective even if they initially seem irrational.
Exactly. It's like that airline struggling with customer dissatisfaction. Due to flight delays, they weren't going to magically eliminate delays. So instead of focusing on objective punctuality, they addressed the feeling of being powerless and out of control.
Ah, the dreaded flight delay. What did they do? Offer everyone free in-flight Wi-Fi.
Close. They started providing more frequent and transparent updates, even offering text message updates so passengers wouldn't feel trapped at the gate. They acknowledged the emotional reality of the situation.
So they basically hacked the psychology of the delay by making people feel more in control. Did it work?
Customer satisfaction actually went up, even though the delay stayed the same. They focused on the passenger's experience, not just the numbers. And you can apply the same principle to tech. Imagine encouraging people to use a new app, not just by highlighting its features, but by understanding the emotional needs it fulfills.
So rather than saying, hey, this app has the fastest processing speeds, we should be saying, this app will finally help you declutter your digital life and give you peace of mind.
Exactly. It's about tapping into those deeper motivations. And this idea of psychologic has huge implications for the tech world, from marketing to user experience design. But it all comes back to Sutherland's idea of alchemy, which challenges us to look beyond the purely rational and embrace the unexpected.
Okay, so we've established that logic isn't always the answer. But how do we practically apply this alchemy in the world of tech? Where do we even begin to look for those hidden forces shaping our decisions?
From here, we dive deeper into how this psychologic plays out in the real world and what that means for you, especially if you are looking to understand this strange, wonderful world of tech and, frankly, just human behavior.
Ooh, we're ready to get alchemical. Let's keep going.
One fascinating concept Sutherland explores is costly signaling. The idea that we unconsciously interpret certain things as markers of quality and trustworthiness. It's like a mental shortcut we use to make sense of a world overflowing with information and choices, especially in the tech world.
So it's not just about what a tech product does, but also about what it signals. Can you give an example?
Think about a beautifully designed website or app. Have you ever noticed how that alone can make you feel more confident about a company, even if you don't know anything else about them?
That's so true. I'm way more likely to trust a company that's invested in a well-designed online experience.
Yeah.
It makes me think they're more likely to care about the details of their product as well.
Exactly. It signals that they're willing to invest time and resources, which makes us think they're more likely to be successful and reliable. It's a subtle cue, but a powerful one.
So a sleek website is like a peacock's tail feathers. It's a costly signal that suggests the company is healthy and thriving.
That's a great analogy, and it applies to all sorts of things in tech. Think about those elaborate product launch events that Apple is famous for. Those aren't just about announcing a new phone. They're about creating a sense of excitement and exclusivity. signaling that this is a product worth paying attention to.
Right. And it works. People line up for days to get their hands on the latest iPhone, even if it's only marginally different from the previous model. It's like that old saying, if you have to ask the price, you can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
The higher price itself becomes a signal of quality.
Precisely. And this idea of costly signaling goes beyond just aesthetics or price. Think about open source software. The fact that developers are willing to share their code freely is a signal of confidence in its quality. It's like they're saying, we're so sure this is good that we're not afraid to let you see how it works.
That makes sense. It's like a chef letting you peek into their kitchen. If they're not hiding anything, you're more likely to trust that they're using high-quality ingredients and following proper procedures.
Exactly. Transparency and willingness to share can be powerful signals of quality and trustworthiness in tech.
This is really making me think about how we evaluate tech products and companies. It's not just about the features and specs. It's about those subtle cues that tell us a story about who they are and what they stand for.
And that story can be more persuasive than any datasheet or marketing brochure.
Okay, so we've talked about how costly signaling can build trust. But are there downsides? Could this lead us to overvalue something just because it's flashy or expensive?
That's a great question and definitely something to be aware of. It's why we need to be discerning consumers and not just blindly follow the signals. Sutherland points out that we should always consider the context of the signal.
So a high price tag might signal quality in one context, but it could just be hype in another.
Exactly. $1,000 smartphone might make sense if you're a professional photographer who needs the absolute best camera technology, but for the average person, it might just be a status symbol. It's about understanding your own needs and priorities.
This idea of costly signaling feels like a powerful tool, but also one that can be easily manipulated. What are some other pitfalls we should watch out for?
Well, sometimes costly signals can be misleading. A company might invest heavily in marketing and branding, but their actual product could be subpar. It's like that restaurant with the fancy decor and overpriced menu, but the food is just okay.
Ouch. So we need to be critical thinkers and look beyond the surface. How do we avoid falling for these traps, especially in a world where everyone is trying to grab our attention?
It's about looking for multiple signals and not relying on just one factor. Do your research, read reviews, try the product if possible. Don't be swayed by flashy marketing or a high price tag alone.
So it's all about being an informed and discerning consumer, even or perhaps especially in the fast-paced world of tech.
Exactly. It's about being aware of those psychological forces at play and using that awareness to make better decisions.
This has been incredibly insightful. Costly signaling is something I'll definitely be thinking about more, but it feels like we've only just scratched the surface of alchemy. What other fascinating principles does Sutherland explore?
Well, this idea of how we perceive value ties into another concept Sutherland calls the focusing illusion, which is our tendency to overemphasize the importance of the things we're currently focused on.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break that down for me. How does the focusing illusion work, and how does it relate to tech?
Think about the last time you bought a new tech gadget. You probably spent hours researching specs, comparing features, and reading reviews. You were totally focused on those details.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. I even watched those unboxing videos on YouTube. It's like a whole ritual.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Once you actually start using the gadget, those initial details might not seem as important. You might realize that the battery life isn't as great as you thought, or that the software is clunky. But at the time of purchase, you were so focused on those specific features that you overlook the bigger picture.
You're so right. It's like when you buy a car and you're obsessed with the leather seats, but later you realize they're actually kind of a pain to maintain. Or those fancy headphones that look amazing but sound just okay.
Exactly. The focusing illusion makes us overestimate the importance of whatever is currently in our spotlight, and this applies to tech in a big way. Companies know how to capture our attention with flashy features and marketing campaigns. But we need to be aware of this tendency, so we don't get swept up in the hype.
So how do we combat this focusing illusion? Should we avoid reading reviews or comparing features altogether?
Not necessarily. Information is important, but Sutherland suggests we need to consciously shift our focus to the long-term consequences of our decisions. Instead of just getting caught up in the initial excitement, ask yourself, what will it be like to actually use this product day after day? Will it truly improve my life? Or is it just a shiny distraction?
That's great advice. It's like the difference between buying a cookbook and actually cooking the recipes. One is exciting and inspiring, but the other requires effort and commitment. We need to make sure the initial excitement translates into real-world value.
Absolutely. And this applies not just to buying gadgets, but also to building tech products. Companies need to think about the long-term user experience, not just the initial wow factor.
So instead of just cramming in as many features as possible, these should focus on creating products that are truly useful and enjoyable to use over time.
Exactly. It's about understanding what truly matters to users and building products that meet those needs in a sustainable way.
This idea of the focusing illusion is really making me think about my own tech habits. I'm definitely guilty of getting caught up in the hype sometimes. But it's empowering to know that we can consciously shift our focus and make more informed decisions.
Absolutely. Awareness is the first step. And once we're aware of these tendencies, we can start to make choices that are more aligned with our true values and priorities.
Okay, so we've covered the limits of logic, the power of psychologic, costly signaling, and the focusing illusion. It feels like my brain is getting a serious workout, but I'm loving it.
Me too. But that's the beauty of alchemy. It challenges us to think differently about the world, especially in the context of tech. And I think one of the most powerful ideas Sutherland puts forward is this idea of reframing the problem.
Ooh, I like the sound of that. Reframing the problem. Tell me more.
He argues that sometimes the best solutions come from looking at a problem from a completely different angle. It's like that classic riddle, how do you fit an elephant in a refrigerator?
Hmm. This is a trick question. I feel like I'm walking into a trap here.
It's all about perspective. The answer is you open a door, put the elephant in, and close the door. It sounds silly, but it highlights how our assumptions can limit our thinking. We assume the refrigerator is already full, but that wasn't specified in the riddle.
Okay, I see your point. Sometimes we get so stuck in our usual way of thinking that we miss the simple, elegant solutions.
Exactly. And this happens all the time in tech. We get fixated on solving a problem in a certain way. But if we reframe the problem, we might find a much better solution. Sutherland gives the example of how the invention of the phrase designated driver changed social norms around drinking and driving.
Interesting. It wasn't about lecturing people about the dangers of drunk driving. It was about providing a new way to think about the situation. How does this apply to tech?
Think about cybersecurity. Instead of focusing on building ever more complex firewalls and security systems, what if we reframed the problem and focused on educating users about best practices? Or what if we designed systems that are inherently more resistant to attacks?
It's about shifting the focus from prevention to resilience. That's a really interesting perspective.
Exactly. And sometimes reframing the problem can lead to truly innovative solutions. Think about how Sony reframed the problem with the Walkman. They actually removed the recording function to make it a hit.
Wait, seriously, they took away a feature. That doesn't sound very logical.
It wasn't logical, it was psychological. They realized that having a recording function made the product too complicated and confusing. By simplifying it and focusing on the core experience of listening to music on the go, they created a product that was truly revolutionary.
This is blowing my mind. It's like they turned a no into a yes by looking at it from a totally different perspective.
That's the power of reframing. It's about challenging your assumptions and looking for creative solutions that might not be immediately obvious.
Okay, so reframing the problem. That's definitely going on my list of alchemical principles to remember. But how do we actually put all of this into practice? It's one thing to read about these ideas. It's another thing to actually use them in our daily lives, especially in the ever-evolving world of tech.
That's where Sutherland's alchemy really shines. He doesn't just present these ideas in a theoretical way. He provides practical tips on how to apply them.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me the inside scoop on how to become a master alchemist in the realm of tech.
He encourages us to experiment with small changes, whether it's a tweak to a website button, a new way of framing a question to users, or a different approach to product development. He also emphasizes the power of storytelling and how it can make our ideas more memorable and persuasive.
So it's about being playful, being curious, and not being afraid to break the rules a little bit, kind of like those early tech pioneers who weren't afraid to try crazy ideas.
Exactly. It's about embracing that childlike sense of wonder and experimentation, but with a deep understanding of human psychology.
You know, it's amazing to think about how these seemingly simple ideas, these little tweaks and shifts in perspective, can have such a profound impact on the world of technology.
It really is, and I think that's the beauty of alchemy. It reminds us that sometimes the most powerful solutions are the ones that don't make sense at first glance.
This deep dive into alchemy has been a wild ride. It's like we've been given a secret decoder ring for understanding not just the tech world, but human behavior in general.
It really highlights how much we take for granted when it comes to decision making. We assume logic is king, but Sutherland shows us that's just not true.
Right. Remember that idea of 10 times 1 not being the same as 1 times 10? That stuck with me. It perfectly illustrates how our intuition, particularly in tech and marketing, can lead us astray.
Absolutely. We tend to think linearly, but human behavior is anything but linear. Emotions, context, the subtle signals we send and receive, all these things influence our choices in ways we don't even realize.
And speaking of signals, that story about Red Bull is mind-blowing. It's like the poster child for psychologic at work in the tech world. Who would have thought a drink that tastes, well, let's just say unique, could become such a massive success?
It defies conventional wisdom. You're supposed to create a product people like that tastes good, but Red Bull did the opposite. They made it expensive, inconvenient, and not exactly palatable.
And yet people love it. It's like they built an aura of exclusivity and aspiration around a simple energy drink. It's not just a beverage. It's a statement.
Exactly. And I think part of their success is that they brilliantly tapped into the placebo effect by creating this mystique of energy and power around the brand. People believe it gives them a boost.
That's almost like those magic potions you read about in fantasy novels. They convince you they're working, and suddenly you feel invincible.
That's a great comparison. And it's not just Red Bull. Think about the ritual of brewing coffee, the grinding of the beans, the aroma filling the air, the anticipation. It's more than just caffeine. It's an experience that triggers a certain feeling.
So are you saying all successful tech products are basically placebos?
Not quite. But I do think many successful brands, particularly in tech, understand the power of creating meaning and value beyond just functionality. They tap into emotional needs, even ones we might not consciously recognize.
Okay, that makes sense. We often try to measure everything in tech through data and analytics, but maybe we're missing the human element, those intangible qualities that make a product or brand truly resonate.
You're spot on. Data is important, but it can't capture everything. We need to be more attuned to the power of psychologic, to be willing to experiment, to embrace those ideas that might seem nonsensical at first glance.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. Sutherland's given us a whole new way to see the world, especially when it comes to tech.
He has, and the key takeaway is to be aware of those hidden forces shaping our choices, whether we're consumers or creators. By understanding alchemy, we unlock new possibilities to create products and experiences that are not just effective, but meaningful and delightful.
It's like Sutherland is saying, don't just think outside the box, question the existence of the box altogether.
I love that. Challenge those assumptions we don't even realize we're making. That's where the real magic happens.
Well, on that note of magic and nonsense, it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, I'm going to leave you with a thought. What if you applied one of these alchemical principles to a challenge you're facing right now? What assumptions could you question? What perspective could you shift? What little bit of nonsense could you inject into your thinking? Go to www.liminal.pt to know how to grow your business with MarTech.